I went home and I told her we can make $6,000 if I work for U.S. Steel. And we both looked at each other and said, we won't be able to spend all that. And that's how inflation has affected our lives.
That was Red Berenson, and this is On the Bench with Mike Hall. That's me. Red is the definition of a legend in his sport. From playing in college, then the pros, to coaching in both levels, he's succeeded everywhere he's been. No surprise he's comfortable on ice, as he was born in Canada back in the 1930s. He brought his stick down to Ann Arbor to play college hockey as a Wolverine, and he was good. Good enough to make a professional career out of it. Berenson played in the NHL for 17 seasons with the Canadiens, Red Wings, Rangers, and Blues. In 1965, he hoisted the Stanley Cup as a player for Montreal. And individually, he had a couple accomplishments worth noting. He played in 6 All-Star games, and in 1968, he scored a double hat trick in a game. 6 goals! In the entire history of the NHL, only one player has topped that, a guy named Joe Malone in 1920. But what Red will be known for most is his time as a head coach. He started out with the St. Louis Blues before deciding to head back to Ann Arbor and take the reins at his alma mater. He was the Michigan head man for a long time. We're talking 33 years until he stepped away in 2017. As head coach, he won the national championship twice while going to 11 Frozen Fours. In 2018, the U.S. Hockey Hall of Fame inducted him as a member, and in the summer of 2020, he became a special advisor to Big Ten Commissioner Kevin Warren. I started our chat by asking Red to say his full name.
Gordon Arthur Berenson.
So where'd Red come from?
Well, when I was young, I had red hair. And my dad had red hair. And my mom had red hair. And both my sisters had red hair. So my dad was called Red, and it didn't take long for my friends to pick up on that, and pretty soon I was Red.
Okay, so you couldn't have everyone in the family go by Red, though. You were the one who picked up the nickname after your dad.
Yep.
Anyone still call you Gordon?
Yeah, my sisters do.
Yeah.
And my relatives do. So I was Gordon when I was young.
Right. Any other nicknames in your life?
Not really, no. I mean, not that I can think of. I mean, Red Baron was kind of a hockey nickname for a while in St. Louis, but that's about it.
I've noticed modern day hockey nicknames, like a lot of it is just you add Z to the end. So I have friends who are hockey players, and they'd be like, Halsey, how are you, Halsey? And I feel like that only seems to happen in hockey right now.
Right. Yeah, it's pretty common. Like nobody gets called by their name. It's just it's a friendly way of saying their last name or their first name.
There's something about the hockey culture. Like, I'm sure you experience it, but there's, the way that you can fight someone and then be totally fine afterwards. And the way that almost every hockey player I know is like down to earth and a decent person. And you don't get that with as much consistency in other sports, I feel like. Do you get that?
Oh, yeah. There's no question. I mean, hockey is very intense and it's personal, and yet the players are humble, and the game humbles them along the way, and so they never get too big for their britches. So they're pretty grounded, and they're easy to deal with when you're the media, for example. I've heard a lot of people over the years say, geez, I'd rather interview a hockey player than most other sports because they're real people, and they are.
I was friends with Adam Burrish, who played for the Blackhawks for a while, and he was a Badger in college, and he did some studio stuff with us at BTN. And when he was injured one year, so he did studio stuff, and when he was done, he went back to the Hawks, and he said, hey, why don't you come to my first game back? And I go to his first game back, and he doesn't start, but he gets in a minute and a half into the game. He goes right to someone on the other team, drops gloves, and goes with them. And it was like his first time back in like 9 months. And I saw him after the game. I was like, what happened? He was like, I don't know. I just saw him and felt like going with him. We're buddies.
Yeah. Well, they're buddies unless you're right in the middle of it. Yeah. Yeah. And there's not as many fights in the game now when you talk about fighting. And there are guys in the league I'm talking about the NHL, that are only there because they can be intimidators, or they can be protectors. They could be a protector of a top player. And so when Gretzky played, for example, they had a couple of tough guys on that team that would keep the other team honest from trying to take Gretzky off his game. There's not as much of that now in modern hockey, but the odd time you'll see it. But the game is still an intense physical game.
Yeah, and the shape you got to be in is incredible. Okay, so you're a Canadian kid. How do you get to Michigan to play hockey? What do you remember about that choice in your life?
Well, I remember I was establishing myself as a better than average player, and I saw some of my teammates get recruited by schools, and then I talked to some old hockey players that had played in the NHL, and they really encouraged me to go to school. They said, if you're going to make it to the NHL, you can still make it, but get an education, have something to fall back on. You don't want to be a hockey bum like I have become, this particular guy. And I respected him for that.
Yeah.
And so I started thinking seriously about going to school. And I was a pretty good student. I graduated early in high school. And in fact, I graduated when I was 16. I was in 12th grade when I was 15, but I turned 16 in December and graduated. So I was way ahead of my buddies or my hockey guys. So I went to high school again the next year after I graduated and took 11th grade and 12th grade chemistry at the same time, because I hadn't taken chemistry. I'd taken French and physics, but not chemistry. And so I thought I should take chemistry. And then the following year, my friends that we were going to go to college together, we talked about it, were still in school. And so I took a year off and literally worked full time as a plumber's helper and played hockey. And then I was ready to go to college. So by then we started writing schools, and we went to the library, and we wanted to make sure we went to a good U.S. college. And in those days, the schools in the U.S. had varying reputations. Some of them weren't considered that good by Canadian standards and so on. So I went to the library, and we found the best schools that had hockey. And University of Michigan was one of them. And they had scholarships. So we wrote the coach. It was Al Renfrew. And he responded right away, and he asked me to come down there for a visit. And so we did. And so I told him, well, there's 4 other guys that want to come too. And so we all came to Michigan together. There were 5 of us.
Okay, that is fascinating. And you threw in like 5 more fascinating things in there. So let me see if I can get to all of them. You were in 12th grade as a 15-year-old?
Yeah. Well, I was lucky. When I was young, my mom's brother, my Uncle Bill, he had been a school teacher. And so he prompted my mother to make sure I learned how to read and write before I went to school, even in kindergarten. So before I went to kindergarten, I could read and write. And so I had a big advantage. So they rushed me right through kindergarten, grade 1. Before I knew it, I was in grade 2. And then I skipped 7th grade. So I ended up in 9th grade when I was 12. and there was a girl sitting beside me. She looked like Marilyn Monroe. She was 18. And I couldn't keep my eyes off her. And I was 12. Like, it was crazy. She got married that year. So it was old-time hockey, I guess.
Oh, my gosh. So wait a minute. So in Canada at the time, how old did you have to be to drive a car?
16.
Okay, so you were in high school years before you would even be able to drive a car.
Yeah, I was 12, yeah.
Oh
so
my!
I know that. Yeah, it was, but it worked out fine. And
I'll say.
I finally grew up, like physically, I grew when I was in 11th and 12th grade. So I was 15 or so, I started to grow. So I wasn't really the runt of the school for long. And then I finally grew up. And then hockey helped me keep my credibility as well. So school and hockey has been a big part of my life.
So Red, intellectually, you're a wonderkind.
Well, I got a head start, I guess. And I've always said maybe they were short of students or they had a surplus of students, but there were a couple of us that moved forward, and we were young when we got to 12th grade.
Oh my goodness. And then just real quick before we move forward. So you finished 12th grade and then go back and take 2 science courses?
Yeah, I took chemistry 11th grade and 12th grade at the same time. And you can't do that really, because you need 11th grade before you can
Yeah.
understand 12th grade. So
Right.
I got,
for a reason, in order.
I remember we had departmental exams. Like those were, it would be like a state exam, and to make sure everybody was on the same curriculum in the province of Saskatchewan, where I was from. And I got 95 on the final exam for 11th grade, and I got 50 for the final exam on the 12th grade chemistry. So I barely squeaked through in chemistry.
Well, we'll forgive you for that. Okay, so that means when you did go to Michigan, after you took a year off, were you caught up? So you were about 18 when you went to Michigan?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that worked out good.
I think so. You picked the number 9 to wear there. How come?
Well, I wore number 7 in junior hockey in Saskatchewan, and I really liked number 7. And so I got to Michigan, and the coach said right away, he said, no, this is, you come to Michigan, this is Gordie Howe country, you wear number 9. And so that was fine with me.
So you're at Michigan, and you've now got a year of being a plumber's helper. So I'm sure you're the popular guy in the dorm if something goes wrong, right?
Well, I don't know if it came to that, but I was pretty handy.
Yeah. When did it hit you in college that you were a pretty good player at a next level?
Well, every year I was there, they didn't have a draft then. There was no amateur draft. And so I was the property of Montreal Canadiens because of where I came from in Saskatchewan.
Oh, okay.
So it was kind of like territories. And if you were from Saskatoon, you belonged to the Blackhawks. If you were from Estevan, Saskatchewan, you belonged to the Bruins. And Prince Albert was the Rangers, and so on. And if you're from Regina, where I was from, you belonged to Montreal. So each year, Montreal tried to get me to leave school. And for one reason or another, they thought, there was nobody had ever come out of college straight to the NHL. And they thought I would get better development in the minors or wherever. But I'd made up my mind. I was going to get an education. I was going to have something to fall back on. And so I turned them down every year, but my stock seemed to keep growing with them, and that was good. And so finally we finished the Final Four in my senior year. We did not win. I still regret that. We lost to Clarkson, and then they end up losing to Michigan Tech, which was one of our big rivals. Michigan Tech was a powerhouse in those days. This is in the 50s, late 50s. And so anyway, we lost that game, and then the assistant manager of Montreal Canadiens was Kenny Reardon, and he was at the weekend, those games, and he drove me to Boston, and we sat down in a hotel room that night, or the next morning actually, and we hammered out a simple contract, and there were no agents or anybody then. And so anyway, I played that night for the Bruins, or for the Rangers, or for the Montreal against the Bruins. That was my first NHL game.
You played the night that you signed a contract in a hotel?
Yeah. But it was the day after we played our final college game. So then I finished the season with Montreal, and I still went back to Michigan and finished up my exams. And so that worked out good. So I graduated. I was still there 4 years. And I did it the right way, and now I had a chance to play in the NHL.
So you graduated for 4 years, but were able to start playing as a professional NHL hockey player before you'd officially wrap things up.
Yeah, that was good. Well, we were done at Michigan. The season was over, so it was fine to do that. But anyway, it got a little complicated, but I felt really gratified. I remember sitting in the locker room in Boston Gardens and looking around at all the great players from Montreal, guys like Beliveau and Jeffrey On and Jacques Plante and Dickie Moore and Henry Richard and so on. And I was just in awe, and I couldn't believe it. And, but I felt good. Like I was finishing school, and there was going to be life after hockey. And that was my whole thought process. So I made it, and I did it the right way. I didn't leave early. I did the right thing for myself and our coach and my teammates. So it was a good feeling.
What do you remember detail-wise about that first contract? Like, do you remember what the compensation was?
Oh, I can tell you what it was. It was a 2-year contract for $20,000 total. And it was the minimum in the league was 7,000. So I got 7,000 to play and 6,000 to sign for both those years. And that was pretty good money. And then of course, Kenny Reardon, he made it sound like I was robbing a bank. He can't pay you that much, But anyway, so I got NHL money and I had a decent signing bonus at that time. Like the wages for when I was a senior at Michigan and I had a interview with U.S. Steel, and I was in the business school, and the companies used to come to the business school. They probably still do sometimes, but they would come and recruit there, and they would interview seniors and so on. So anyway, I got this interview, and they offered me a job for $6,000. And so, I went home, and I was married at the time. I got married after my freshman year to my hometown sweetheart, and we're still married, obviously. But I went home and I told her we can make $6,000 if I work for U.S. Steel. And we both looked at each other and said, we won't be able to spend all that. And that's how inflation has affected our lives.
But by the way, so you're a 15-year-old who's a senior in high school, and you got married your first year in college. You're just ahead of everybody in life, Red.
Well, it wasn't unusual. Like, of all my friends, we were the last ones to get married.
Really?
So you pretty much, when you graduated from high school, and the girls either got a job or went to college. If they got a job, they probably got married. And the boys, the same thing. And there weren't a lot of us. There was a small percent of our high school went to college. But all my buddies were married before I was.
How about that?
And now I was 19 when I got married, and Joy was 18. And that wasn't unusual at that time.
Well, pretty lucky she still likes you, huh?
Yeah, it is pretty lucky, All
right, so you're a Montreal Canadien, this historic franchise, and sure enough, you win a Stanley Cup with them. What was that like?
Well, it wasn't a surprise in Montreal. I mean, they'd had some good teams, but the first year or two, they got knocked out of the playoffs. One year by Chicago, and Chicago won it, I think, in '64, and another year by Toronto. And there were only 6 teams, remember, and there was a 70-game schedule, and we played each other 14 times. So you talk about rivalries, and there were no buddies on the other team then. I mean, it was all business, and it was a lot of fierce competition and so on. But nevertheless, we won in '65. And it was a great feeling, but it wasn't like it is today. You had to win 2 series to win the Stanley Cup. Well, now you have to win 4. You have to win 16 games, and it was a thrill to win. But it wasn't like the players were not surprised. I mean, they expected to win. They were expected to win because they played for Montreal.
How different was celebration back then in the '60s versus a celebration now of winning a
Well, I can tell you, we had a parade a day, or I think it was the next day or the day after that. But I mean, the players celebrated hard, and but we had the parade, and the next day I took off for Ann Arbor, and because I was enrolled in the business school to start on my MBA. So I was in class the day after the parade, and nobody knew me from Adam. It was in the summer. But one of the professors was from Nova Scotia, and his name was Dave Brophy, and he recognized my name, and he was a hockey fan, and he realized, geez, this guy just played in the Stanley Cup final, and he's in my class. And so that was good. I felt good about that. That was my best day, really, when I thought about my life and my plan and my career, is we'd won a Stanley Cup. Now I'm getting my MBA. I'll be able to look after myself when hockey's over.
Red, you're embarrassing me. You've done all these things in your life. You win a Stanley Cup, and the day after the parade, you're back at school to get your MBA. This is remarkable.
Yeah. And then I had a wife in and 2 little girls by then too. So we rented a house from one of the football coaches who took the summer off. And so we rented his house and we went to school and worked hard at it, and then went back to training camp the next year.
Was the tradition alive back then that you get like a day with the cup? Was that a thing back then?
No, nothing. I mean, we got our picture taken with it if we were lucky. And we did. I had a camera. Fortunately, my wife worked at Argus Camera in Ann Arbor. And so we had a camera, a 35 millimeter camera. So I've got some good pictures from that.
I was going to say, I bet you still have those pictures, don't you?
I haven't looked at them in years. They're all slides. We've got them in a catalog of slides. But yeah, we have them. My favorite one is with Beliveau. He was my favorite player there, and he was really good to me. He was good to the young players, and I really had a lot of respect for Jean Beliveau.
Well, you earned a lot of respect for various reasons, as we've already covered on this. But one of them in particular is something that's almost never happened in the NHL. You scored a double hat trick in a game. You scored 6 goals. First off, are you sure you did? And that's not just a lie that has grown over the years?
Yeah. Oh, it's. I've had people congratulate me for scoring 7 goals, and I've had to remind. No, it was only 6 goals, but it was just one of those games. So I was an honest player, and I could score, but I wasn't a prolific scorer, or a natural scorer. I was more of a two-way player. But nevertheless, this one night we're playing in Philadelphia. We didn't like Philadelphia. I was playing for St. Louis. And it was in early November. I think it was November the 7th. And they were a rival of ours, and they had a defense pair of Joe Watson and Ed Van Impe, and they were their top 2 defensemen. So they always played them against my line. When I was on the ice, they had their best defenseman out there. And that night, things didn't go well for Van Impe and Watson. I got lucky and scored the last minute of the first period, and to go ahead 1-0. And then we came out in the second period, and I got 4, and they were all honest goals, and then one more in the third period. But it was one of those games. We won 8-0, and Scotty Bowman was our coach, and he wanted me to go back out on the ice late in the game, and I didn't want to go. I said, no, I don't want to go. We got a shutout, and Jacques Plante was playing goal that night, and I wouldn't want to face Jacques Plante if I would have gone out and allowed the other team to score a goal because I wanted to score another goal. I didn't realize this was a record. I just thought it was a good night.
See, Scotty Bowman knew what he was doing because he was thinking, no. Years from now, Red, people are going to think you scored 7. We got to get ahead of this.
Yeah,
make that 7.
Well, I did hit the crossbar on another one. It was one of those nights. Everything was going in. And the interesting thing is that there were no power play goals, no empty net goals, no shorthanded goals, no rebounds, no tip-ins. These were all good goals, like team goals. And if you listen to Dan Kelly, now you know Danny Kelly, who's
Absolutely.
the announcer for the Big Ten.
Right.
And he does a great job. Well, his dad was announcing the game that I scored 6 goals. And he was our announcer in St. Louis. He was terrific. And when I listen to him announce those goals, you'll hear, well, Talbot gets the puck and moves it to Roberts, and Roberts up to Berenson. Berenson gets out, he's in a low, scores, and then it's Harvey, and it's McCreary, and it's Ab McDonald. It's all the other players that had touched the puck. It was old-time hockey coming up the ice together. So it wasn't just me going end to end, but I was the recipient of just a great team effort that night.
Oh, man. What was chatter like, either on the bench or on the ice when you're 6?
The chatter was fine. I mean, the players were fine. I didn't get carried away with it. There was no celebrating or anything. But we won the game, and then Glenn Hall, who was one of my great buddies in St. Louis and still is, he was our other goalie that night. We had 2 great old-timer goalies, or veteran goalies, Hall of Fame goalies. But anyway, I come off the ice, and he said, well, good game, young fellow. At least you were plus tonight. Meaning I was, or plus, we were always worried about our plus and minus. So he kept me humble.
Oh, man. So, okay. So you have this really great career for a long time, almost 2 decades playing in the NHL. And not long after, you become a head coach in the NHL. You win Coach of the Year. You've clearly got a future coaching in the NHL if you want it. What makes you decide, I'm going to go to college and go coach my alma mater?
Well, it wasn't like I was looking to leave the NHL, but I can tell you I was getting a little bored. I went from St. Louis. We had a pretty good run in St. Louis, and I got fired, as coaches do. I mean, the year after I was Coach of the Year in the NHL, I was fired, and I felt bad about it, obviously, and was disappointed. Emil Francis was the general manager. I think he was disappointed. He had a lot of pressure on him from the Ralston Purina people, and they owned the team then, and so they made the decision to replace me, and so I was now a free agent as a coach. And Scotty Bowman, now by then, had won several Stanley Cups in Montreal, but now he was a general manager and coach in Buffalo. And he called me about coming to Buffalo and be an assistant coach with him. And Jimmy Roberts was the other assistant coach. And Jimmy and I were longtime teammates and buddies. So that worked out good in Buffalo. But by then, Michigan was considering changing their program, and they were worried about the future of the program. And they kept after me about coming back. And finally, I said I would come over. I was going to bring my oldest son, Gordy, over. He was a senior in high school, and he wanted to look at Michigan. I said, I'll come over after the season. And I brought Gordy over, and he had a tour of the school and had some interviews. And I went and visited Don Canham, who was the athletic director, and Al Renfrew, who was my old coach. And long story short, they wanted me to come back and get the program going again, Michigan, the way it should be. And so we drove back, my son Gordy and I, and on the way back, he said, geez, Dad, I'd really like to go to Michigan if I can. And I said, what would you think if I came with you? Because I might be coming back. And sure enough, that's what happened. So Scotty was really good. I had a meeting with Scotty, and he always had a soft spot for college hockey and the development and the coaching of kids that were smart kids and so on. And so I was fine with it. I had my time in the NHL, and I really enjoyed it. I'm still, we really kept current with the NHL because we're recruiting kids that are being drafted and playing in the NHL. So I never felt I was out of touch, but I never realized I would be at Michigan 35 years either.
Incredible. In that run, you made 11 Frozen Fours. And I've been lucky enough, back when I was at ESPN, I worked a couple Frozen Fours as the intermission host and the sideline reporter. And those things are great. There's just a buzz when you're in a Frozen Four. I mean, it feels really big and important and cool. How different are the Frozen Fours now versus back when you started coaching with Michigan?
Well, yeah, they're bigger and better now, obviously, than they were when I was a player at Michigan. But when I came back as a coach, it was such an accomplishment to get there that our players and sometimes even our coaches were overwhelmed by all the hype at the Frozen Four. And so the first couple of times we were there, we didn't do well. And we couldn't seem to get past the first game. And even though we were playing, we might have been a better team or a favorite team. We didn't even get in the championship game until 96. And finally, it was our time. And we won in overtime with Brendan Morrison's winning goal in Cincinnati. And then we lost all those good players in 97. 97 was a better team than 96. And we got knocked out by BU, who we had knocked out the previous year. And Jackie Parker had a great program at BU, and we had a great rivalry with them. But the next year, 97, with all these incoming freshmen and a few seniors like Billy McCall, who was terrific, and Matt Herr and Marty Turco in goal, we ended up beating a better team, really, Boston College. And Jerry York's team, they were a great team, but we won the game in Boston in overtime again, Josh Langfeld in an overtime goal. So the best team doesn't always win in college hockey. You have that one game showdown, and if you lose, you're done. But if you win, it's magical.
In those 30 plus years, how close did you ever come to taking another job?
No, not close at all. I had some opportunities, but I was too invested in our college players and our team and recruiting players and so on. Like you really feel like you'd be turning your back on them if you left. And then I'd already had my time in the NHL, so it wasn't a dream of mine to go back to the NHL and be a coach. I'd already been a coach there, and I've been a player there, and I respect the eliteness of the NHL, but it didn't have any magic for me anymore.
In your time as a coach, best college hockey player that you coached?
Boy, that would be hard to say. And I know if I say one, I mean, I'll get 100 calls from, I've had some terrific players, really. I mean, we've had a few Hobie.
Talented? Is there a more talented person that you've had that you saw him and you're like, maybe they're not the best player, but the talent just blows you away?
Well, in the early days, Brendan Morrison, who stayed 4 years and graduated in '97 and ended up winning the Hobie Baker. I mean, he just got better every year, and he had a Hobie Baker career at Michigan, and he made other players better around him, and he was humble, and he was a good student and a good person, and he was the epitome of what you'd want in your players, as if you were a teammate of his or if you were a coach. And then, of course, we had other players that went on to win the Hobie Bakers and go right to the NHL. I mean, we had a couple of freshmen that were so good that they signed after their freshman year. And Dylan Larkin was one of them in Detroit now. And Kyle Connor was another one in Winnipeg. And he's nearly a 40-goal scorer now in the NHL. And that was after 1 year at Michigan. And I was hoping these guys would stay more than 1 year, obviously. Right. But we've had some terrific defensemen of late. You'd recognize Zach Werenski's name as a great young player in the NHL, and we haven't had as many goalies. I mean, Turco was the one goalie that really made an impact at our level, and then again in the NHL.
Yeah. How about best college hockey player you saw? So it doesn't have to be on your team, but the best player you saw.
Yeah, there have been some dominant players. It'd be hard to put a name on one of them, really. I mean, Michigan State had their under Ron Mason had some great players in our early days here, and I'm trying to think of if you could put one ahead of the other. But you had all those Millers, whether it was Ryan Miller in goal or Kelly Miller, and Kip Miller won the Hobie, and so on. We had some great players in the CCHA. And then Lake Superior had a great program under Frank Anzalone, and he had some players that went on to be great NHL players and so on. So it's been I think that's the one thing that I've really appreciated about the growth of college hockey and producing players that were good students, and then they went on to have a great NHL career as well. And because that was a knock when I first started, Montreal would tell me, "You'll never be a pro if you stay in school." And then they said, "Well, you'll never be an NHL player if you stay in school." And then the next year it was, "Well, you'll never make a living in the NHL. You might play a game, but you'll never last if you stay in school." And so all those concerns have really evaporated. And that's what I'm most proud of with college hockey, is that these kids, and not that they have to be NHL players. I'm just as proud of all the players that we've had over the years that went on to be significant community contributors, whether they were doctors or lawyers or businessmen or teachers or coaches. I mean, terrific people that they benefited from going to college, and whether they had a pro career or not.
In the brief time we've been talking here, you've already told some really incredible stories, but I could argue the most amazing thing about you, we haven't even got to yet. You still play hockey. You can still lace them up, Red. That's incredible to me.
Yeah, I've been lucky. I mean, I have been lucky. I'm 80 now, and so I skate once a week with the Michigan alumni. Now I'm by far the oldest player, but they put up with me. And then I play with the Red Wing alumni, and I'm the oldest player with them. And so we have a lot of fun. But I'm still healthy enough, and I can still get on the ice and skate, not as well as I should or could, but I'm fit enough, and I'm thankful that I can get out and play, because it's still a great game.
Oh, but here's the thing. So I'm not quite the same age as you are, And yet when I go do something physical, my body feels it, Red. So when you play an alumni game in your 80s, that night or the day after, where's your body feeling the pain?
It's not bad, really. It's
Really?
really not bad. Yeah, I mean, there's not as much contact. It's not like we're knocking each other all over the place, but it's still competitive. And yet, I guess I'm just lucky. I don't have any huge concerns. I mean, I'm healthy, and as long as I'm healthy, I'm going to keep playing. It's fun. I really enjoy it. I'll even bring my grandson with me to play with our alumni. Like, they're happy if they can bring their son to play, and I'm bringing my grandson, and he keeps the Berenson stock up high, so that's good.
And you can still smoke him, can't you? You can
I can play. I mean, that's I'm not winning a lot of races now, but it's I'm winning a race just to be on the ice. That's fun.
Tell me something about the new role with Kevin Warren and you and the Big Ten. Like, what is your job? How do you find what that is, your relationship with Kevin?
Well, that's a good question. When Kevin took over as the commissioner of the Big Ten, this is back in December, January, before the virus really took over, and he was on a mission to go and see all the sports at all the schools in the Big Ten. And when he got to Michigan, we were playing Wisconsin that night, and he wanted to meet me. He had something in mind he wanted to talk about, and so we sat down and talked. And he told me his story that his son had actually been at our hockey camp when Kevin was working for the Lions in Detroit, and then he went on to play hockey, and pretty serious hockey, in Minnesota when Kevin was with the Vikings. And so he had a feel for hockey, and he felt like he was a hockey dad. And so he followed the NHL, and he followed college in particular. And when he got the job with the Big Ten, he knew that the Big Ten college hockey conference could be and should be better. And whether or not that means championships or crowds or whatever, he saw a couple of really good games in Ann Arbor with Wisconsin and Michigan. And he saw the passion the fans have, and he really related to that. So he asked me if I would. I told him I'm not looking for a job. I just retired, and I'm happy, but I'm still a fan. But he wanted someone to advise him and be kind of a consultant along the way in terms of our hockey conference, and whether or not that would mean staying in touch with the coaches, having kind of a feel for our conference and which way it's going and how to make it better, and it's particularly in how to make it better. So I'm involved with the coaches. I'm involved with Kevin every week. We talk on Fridays, and if there's more reason to talk, we talk then. He confides in me in terms of any hockey issues or opportunities and so on. I'm sure we'll talk about if there's any future expansion down the road. We'll talk about officiating and keeping, the level of everything in the Big Ten. He wants it to be the best in the country, and I'm all for it. And so here I am. I don't call it work, but I'm involved again. I'm not recruiting and I'm not coaching, but I'm kind of an interim commissioner type person with the real commissioner, Kevin Warren. So and he's a great guy to work with. I have a lot of respect for him. We're having a good time as we move forward.
Well, Red, you've been great with your time. Before you go, I want to do our final segment, which is called Before You Go. 4 questions that are unrelated to each other completely. Let's start with number 1. Give me the best advice that you've ever been given.
Well, I would say it's work hard and have fun. And I use that in coaching as well as with my own family. We had 4 kids, but the work hard is, I think we grew up in a pretty humble environment, and we learned how to work hard, and there's nothing wrong with that. And if you can't work hard, you're probably not going to have fun. You're probably not going to be successful. So the hard work comes first, the fun comes after.
Number 2, if you didn't follow a career in playing and then coaching hockey, what would you have done?
Well, I was interested in business/law, and so whether it would have been like I'd written the law boards my senior year at Michigan, and was prepared if hockey didn't turn out at all to get my law degree and move on. But hockey did work out, and so I was advised to get my MBA, in which I did that just for a little bit of a better resume when I finally went to work. Ironically, just between you and I, I've never had a job. I mean, I really haven't had a job. I've done all this work and preparation. My whole life has been to be able to look after myself after hockey. I'm still in hockey, and and I'm fine with that. I mean, it's been a great trip.
Yeah. Well, think about it. If you ended up getting that law degree, you could have negotiated your own contract. You could have.
Well, I did anyway. I never had an agent. I negotiated my own contract for my whole career. So.
Number 3, give me the best book you've ever read.
Well, there's a laundry list of them. But one of the best books, and I was given when I was a junior hockey player, was by our coach, Murray Armstrong. And he recommended that book. I still have it. It was by Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And the messages in that book were so good about people skills, which a lot of us need to improve on, or to be a better listener, or to be a better convincer, or whatever. That was such a good book for me as a young person. And I would recommend it to any young people. I'm having my grandson read it now.
I love that was within arm's reach of you, which we did not plan that. It naturally happened to be right there next to you.
No, and I've got a lot of them sitting around here, but that was one. And I do like reading books. I've read a lot of books. I've read thousands of books, so I like reading. I read one of the most recent hockey books was Scotty, the book about Scotty Bowman, written by Ken Dryden, and that's a good hockey read.
Final one. Why do you love the sport of hockey?
I love the competition. I love the physical fitness part of the game. I love the skill level, the ability to be able to play the game, whether you're bigger than everybody or smaller than everybody. And there's room for everybody in hockey. And that's been, it's been so rewarding. In the old days, you had to be big and tough. And then you had to be small and skilled and so on. And now there's room for everyone. So I love the sport. I love the intensity, the competition, and the camaraderie. It's a team sport. It's not just, once you learn that, you really enjoy the game more than just worrying about yourself as an individual.
Well, Red Berenson, this was really fun. It was really cool to hear some of these great stories. And more than anything, I hope one day you and your wife find a way to spend that $20,000 from that first contract of yours.
Well, it was in Canadian money too. My NHL pension is still in Canadian money, which isn't very valuable right now. But we're fine. Well, thanks for having me. I've enjoyed it too.
So to recap, he was a high school senior at only 15 years old. The day after his Stanley Cup parade, he went back to Ann Arbor to start his MBA, and he still plays in hockey games now that he's in his 80s. My thanks to the great Red Berenson for joining me. Heads up, our pal Alex Rue continues to make excellent episodes of his Take 10 podcast. Be sure to check those out. That'll do it for this episode. From the Big Ten Network in Chicago, I'm Mike Hall. We'll see you next week.